We've had the news that Man City have launched a new legal challenge against the APT rules. What have you made of that update on that situation?
I think it's really just because at the moment they don't know where APT1, the first hearing, is going to go. Clearly, if the first hearing says that they're right and that all of the rules relating to associated party transactions are null and void, then there won't be any need for APT2. That will just drop away. And then we'll have a blank piece of paper that the Premier League are then going to have to effectively reconstruct the rules from. The question that's going to be also relevant there is, and I think we've seen it with the PSR stuff, because what they're now saying is that they are going to keep PSR in place for next season because they don't know the outcome of the APT cases. And presumably that means that there is a theoretical concern that the APT cases effectively wipe away and say all of Rule E, which are all the financial rules in the Premier League, all of that section is null and void. Now, I don't think that'll happen, but I think that feels like a kind of risk that theoretically could happen. And if it did, then clearly there's no point in putting in place a whole new regime for next season without seeing what that tribunal says. So I think City effectively are just reserving their position in respect of the changes that were made in November. I think it came on the back of them trying to add those questions to the first APT case. So were the rules that were changed in November, were they lawful, or is the whole thing unlawful? And the tribunal said, well, we can decide the case up to the date that you launched it, and we can follow on questions in terms of what our initial and partial judgment said when it came out in October. But what we can't do is look at the changes that have been made by the Premier League after without a completely separate case, because we don't have jurisdiction over that. And so City said, well, on that basis, we'll have to file another claim. And then the parties together have said, well, the easiest thing for us to do is to reconstitute the tribunal as with the same people as the first APT case. So, I mean, it's all quite technical. I don't know if people can follow how this works, but the key thing to watch is what happens from that follow-on determination hearing for the first APT case. We should know that in the next couple of weeks. If they endorse the rules as not being null and void, i.e. that they can be tweaked, then we will go on to the second APT case and decide whether the November changes were lawful or not.
You touched on there about the PSR rules that they're going to remain in place for next season. Which clubs will be particularly concerned about that? Well, obviously the likes of Aston Villa and Newcastle, and lately Man United have expressed concerns about it. Would that be an issue for them next season?
Well, first of all, it's quite hard to compare because we never had details of what the squad cost control system would look like in the Premier League. We know what it looks like in the UEFA system, and you would think they would be quite similar, but it doesn't need to be exactly the same. And then there are some wrinkles around it where we were told, for example, that the standard cap would be 85%. So you would have at the top of the equation your costs, and that would be first team costs, amortization, etc. And then at the bottom, you would have revenue, profits on player sales, and your ratio could be 85%. And it was then to drop to 70 if you're in the European competitions, because that's what the limit is in the UEFA competitions. The problem with that is that might be fine if you're in the Champions League, because you know that in terms of your revenue, you're going to get another 60 to 100 million pounds, probably, broadly, by the time you've had your group games and everything else. So you're going to get 60 to 100. But that's not the case if you are in the Europa Conference. If you win the Europa Conference, you're probably doing 10 total. So and you've got a load of costs because you've got to go fly the squad all around Europe for 15 games or something, which is not cheap. People forget about how expensive this sort of stuff is. So we don't know what they were going to do with that part of the rules, and that could have had a material difference to a team like United, for example, because it could have cut United's cap from 85 to 70% just if they were in the Europa Conference, and that would have made a very big difference to them. The flip side is that the squad cost control likely excludes their interest cost, so that would be very good for United. And they won't have that next season. They'll have the old PSR system. So, it's not clear as to who it benefits, who it doesn't. I think the best way to consider it is that the reality at the moment is probably that those clubs that struggle under PSR, particularly those teams that are in that transitional phase, the Newcastles and the Aston Villas, is probably broadly neutral, because both systems are quite hard for them to hit, because both of them have got this big issue with the wage bill.
Of course, with Man City, they've also had the 115 charges case that's been ongoing for ages now. Pep Guardiola revealed that they're expecting the result in about a month, so it indicates somewhere in March, that kind of time. Does that seem right to you?
Well, it's possible. I think it's probably the earliest that they could expect. We don't know whether they've got a specific date from the tribunal by which the determination of the liability part of this will come out. Sometimes you get in these cases at the end, when the judges or the panels are sort of summing up, they say, well, we're not giving a decision today, we're reserving judgment, but we'll try and give you our decision by, and then often they would say something like before Easter. Won't be before Easter, won't be before the summer. They tend to give quite a rough guide, if they give anything at all. It's possible that what they said was, we'd hope to get you the decision before Easter, in which case you're starting to think about the end of March, early April. But we don't know. I mean, as I've said before, this will be a very long and detailed set of reasons, and therefore it could take a very long time. It may well not come for many months. But I suspect Pep wasn't being specific, and he was kind of just sharing the sort of the internal perception as to the likely time when it could start to appear. I think what I am seeing is one or two media queries coming through about availability. So people are starting to plan for it anyway. So we'll see about that. Maybe that's the indicator that people generally have got a sense that it's coming.
I just want to keep an eye out for. And then elsewhere in terms of City, well, their sponsor Etihad looked to launch a local IPO. What could that mean for the club? Would it have anything to do with the 115 charge? Any indication with that?
Well, it's not a strong signal, but I think it is a soft signal. I find it hard to believe that Etihad would want to be embroiled in something with City that went against them at the same time as an IPO. I think that would look very bad, and we don't know what the City decision might say about Etihad and about their involvement in City. And furthermore, there's going to have to be quite a lot of disclosure around their key marketing partners, their key expenditure, their risks, and their historic financials. And that they're, and you can't shy away from it. Their CEO has done two pieces that I've seen in the UK. And I haven't actually seen him do many pieces outside of the UK, which is interesting in itself, but both business related. So one on Sky News, so Sky Business News, and one in the Times business section. And both of those asked them about City and about the value that the company gets from the relationship with City, and he was very, as you might imagine, he was very effusive about the value that the company gets and about the rates that they pay and the fair market value and everything else. Now, you might say, well, so what? Of course he's going to say that. It's an Abu Dhabi airline. Of course he's going to say that, which is fair, except he doesn't have to do any interviews right now. I mean, these are planned. These are not an interview on Sky News or in the business section of the Times is a planned financial PR exercise. It doesn't just happen. Somebody doesn't just pick up the phone and happen to get the chief executive of Etihad on a 1 hour interview. It's part of a process, and it's part of a setup meeting in advance of a corporate activity. So I do think you can probably read something into it. I mean, the extent of it, we'll have to see. But it seems to me another indicator of confidence from those parties related to the case. I mean, Etihad are related to this case, like it or not. The allegation is that Etihad have been involved effectively in this Manchester City conspiracy to put money into the club. I mean, that was how City framed it themselves at in the UEFA CAS case, and we think that this one is very similar. So I think it's an interesting development, but I wouldn't put too much on it. And we'll have to see that because it's a local IPO, i.e. that it's in Abu Dhabi, they will have to publish a prospectus. They will have to quarterly report, and we will see that prospectus. If they are going to imminently IPO, we will see that prospectus quite soon. And so some of these questions will be answered.